Hi and welcome. Today I'm going to make a spread in my Dina Wakley Media Journal. You can see it's almost full and I try to fill the last pages. I'm going to emboss some leafy images to this spread, and what I have already done is I covered it with a layer of watercolor ground, because the watercolor paper in this book is not my favorite. It's kind of a fabric paper and it soaks up the watercolor immediately and you don't have any chance to play with them. I let everything dry completely, so my embossing powder will only stick to my stamped images, and I use Versamark to stamp the image, and I will stamp it to both corners, the top left and the bottom right, so I have kind of a arrangement to start my spread. The stamp I'm using here is from the Pencil Marks number 2. They are now also available as clear stamps. I will link up all the stamp sets I'm using today in my video description. I just moved the stamp on the acrylic block so that I'm able to stamp in this corner. My brush was not clean when I primed the page, so I have some spots here and there, but I don't really mind that. I'm using white embossing powder, and it's a bit difficult, or not really difficult, to emboss in a journal, but it works pretty nice. And here you can see that the powder only sticked to the stamped images. I will now go and heat set the powder. I have my heat gun not in this area of my desk. It's a pretty big desk, and I will be back when I've heat setted it. I want to play with watercolors today, and I have already prepared the paints I'm planning to use. I have my big palettes laid out. I have one for the cool colors and one for the warmth, and I have different watercolor brands in these palettes, mainly the paints from Rosa Gallery, from the Ukraine, and also some Schminke paints and some from Van Gogh, and also this one is from Daniel Smith, but I only have 2 Daniel Smith paints. This is the ultramarine pink. With the Dina Wakley paper in this book, you will see the nice granulation of the paints. That's the reason why I try to use some of the granulating paints. This last one I've added is any of the Schminke high granulating colors, but I don't have in mind which one exactly it is. I really enjoy playing in that loose way with watercolors. I think it's super easy and fun, and it's not intimidating to just push around some colors. Here I'm using the golden yellow color from Rosa Gallery. It's one of my favorite paints. It has a really high flow, and that means it pushes away the other pigments, and that gives me really nice and interesting effects. You also can see a little bit that I didn't cover the paper perfectly with the watercolor ground, because on the left side you can see some different texture, and that is because there I didn't have added the ground perfectly. I don't mind that because this also gives me some really interesting textures. The greens I'm using now is the dusk green from Van Gogh and also the dusk yellow. The dusk yellow is more like a green, I would say. I really love these granulating colors from Van Gogh. What I also like about the Van Gogh colors is that they are at a really nice price level, so it's super affordable paints and they are really good, I feel. Whenever I have puddles of water that I don't want to have, I soak them up with a dry brush. And here you can see that beautiful granulation of the ultramarine pink. Here I go in with a black watercolor pencil just into the wet paint and make some marks and scribbles on my spread. That gives me a nice and chunky look, and I also like the texture you get and that the pigments are flowing a little bit in the wet areas. I also go in with one of the Derwent Inktense pencils. It's a violet color. And they work also great with this technique. I also love the Derwent pencils for drawing in my sketchbook. I will now let this dry, and in the meantime I can prepare my main image for the spread. I'm going to use the textured birds. I picked this lovely one and I stamp it to the Canson XL watercolor paper using the VersaFine clear ink, and now I will also emboss it with black powder. And the reason is that I want to use metallic watercolors to paint that stamped image in, and the metallic paints are usually opaque, which is good, but I don't want them to cover up my outlines, so I decided to emboss them, and so I have a resist against the watercolor. Another way would be, if you don't want to emboss it, you stamp it with a stamping platform and you keep your paper in the corner and also keep your stamp in the platform, then stamp it once, color it in, and come back and stamp it twice. That should work also fine. The paints I'm using are the metallic watercolors from Paul Rubens. They are super nice. I use them regularly just for accents on my paintings and drawings, and also on greeting cards or tags, just as I do it here. As always, I have a blog post for my page over on my website. I will link it up in the video description and you can check it out and have a look at the close-up images. I let that birdie dry and my background is already dry, and here I'm going in with some mixed media stamping to create even more interest and texture on the background. I'm using the Mix It Up 1 stamp set, and it's a mixture of some of the older rubber sets we have. It has stamps from the Mixed Media Marks number 2, it has the Grungy Swirls, and also stamps from the Grungy Stuff. For the Grungy Swirl stamp, I don't want to use black ink, I just want to use something that matches my background. And at first I thought I would use the Rusty Brown, but I believe it's too dark and will be too intense. And here I decided to use the Saffron, and that matches the yellow parts of my page perfectly. And of course I need some splatters, and this time I use one of the metallic colors that I've used for the birdies, so I have that same color on my page, and I feel this makes it look a bit more cohesive. I also want to have some black splatters, and here I just use a super wet brush and activate a little bit of that pigment, and that makes it easy to create some tiny splatters with the black watercolor pencil. Everything has dried, and I have already added some words to the page to make a sentiment, and here I'm adhering the little birdie. Yes, and that is my page for today. I hope you enjoyed it and you are a little bit inspired to create something this weekend, and I hope we will see us next time. Bye!